the language of hate is heard. And we actually now have to consider very seriously what the threat of anti-Semitism is for the 21st century. Pierre Desbois talked of Henri Drumont, the filthy anti-Semitic writer of France in the 19th century, who contributed to the climate in which the Dreyfus case took place. He referred to Faurisson, still recognized and honored. There's a French comedian called Denis who has a cabaret in Paris where Faurisson was applauded when he went in as this Denis, alas, a man from a French African background, but who denies the Holocaust and wallows in the worst kind of anti-Semitism. So we have to acknowledge that what we are combating is not history, it is not past prejudice, it is not even the memory of the Holocaust. What we are combating is alive, alas, and well and active today. Because anti-Semitism has moved, and we've seen it this week, from the back room of the shunned and shamed bunch of knuckle-headed, shaven-headed Nazi admirers into the podiums of the United Nations. And we have to understand the ideology of anti-Semitism, to examine it as a text. I'm a politician. I live with words. What we say, the laws we pass, the speeches we make, the articles we write define who and what we are in all free and democratic politics. So I invite people to re-examine the core text of anti-Semitism. In the 1930s, this place, the Palais des Nations, was where the pitiful appeals against fascism could be heard as states trembled at the march to war of the right-wing dictators. And today, the Palais des Nations, this week, has been allowed to become a platform for a vicious rant against Jews and Jewishness, as vicious a rant as the world has ever seen since Der Stürmer stopped publication in 1945. Because every anti-Semitic statement and accusation, every cry of Jew hate that has been heard since time immemorial was heard again on the podium of the Palais des Nations on Monday. The denial of the Holocaust, that Jews control the economy, that Jews control the media. I wrote a book last year called Globalizing Hatred, the New Anti-Semitism. It was very well received in the press, but you can't find it on sale anywhere in our bookshops, which prefer celebrity trash by pop stars and footballers and reformed drug addicts and every kind of idiot you see in Love Story or on television, instead of serious discussion of current affairs. So when I hear that the Jews control publishing, I wish. But we have in my country a very ugly political party called the British National Party. It's a bit like the Front National from France or Flames Belong. And its leader, Mr. Nick Griffin, the only serious publication he's written is called Who Are the Mindbenders? And he lists, of course, Jewish people who work in television and newspapers and therefore distort the news in favor of Jewish causes and in favor of Israel. You wish. Exactly that language isn't any longer the language of the extreme right heard in Britain or Jean-Marie Le Pen in France. It is language heard from the podium of the Palais des Nations, the most sacred site of the United Nations here in Europe. And anti-Semitism, we have to understand as a real-time threat. It is developed by serious thinkers. The ideologues of anti-Semitism, they're there in the European community. They're very strongly present, of course, in different Muslim communities, in the Arab world, in Pakistan, in India, and their texts there are available, and we have to understand them, we have to analyze them, we have to publish them, we have to deconstruct them, we have to read them. Not enough people read Mein Kampf in time to understand what Hitler would get up to. We have got no excuse today not to study and understand the texts that now are being widely disseminated on the internet, that are available in brochure forms, pamphlet forms, book forms, that are preached by the proselytizers of jihadi Islamism, which has as one of its core beliefs anti-Semitism. It is supported also by contemporary politicians, some certainly on the far left, but in a more organized and coherent way on the far right. In East Europe, in Bulgaria, in France, of course, in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in my own country, the far right is gathering strength, gathering voice. Sometimes its first line of presentation is not, of course, against Jews. It's about protecting national identity. It's produisez français, achetez français, British jobs for British workers. It's the language of nationalist protectionism. It's the language against open borders. It's the xenophobia against all foreigners, against the plombier polonais, against Polish plumbers, against people who come whose names end in a vowel or names end in Stein, or perhaps people who go to a different church or worship in a different faith from the classic European or Euro-Atlantic traditional Christian and Abrahamic faith. And I am extremely worried that we will have a European Parliament election in 6 weeks' time, on the 4th of June in Britain and the Sunday the 7th of June in most of the rest of the EU member states, not here in Switzerland, but just across the border in France. And the extreme right will make a significant breakthrough. They will win seats because there is a tiredness about Europe, there's a mépris, a contempt about the European Union. The votes often will be protest votes against the government of the day, whether it's the Labour and the Socialists in Britain and Spain, or it's the Conservatives in France and Italy. But people will just throw their vote away to the man who makes the most dramatic appeal. And certainly we are very worried in my country that for the first time, open fascists affiliated to an openly anti-Semitic party will gain seats as elected parliamentarians, in this case at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. But once they're there, they have resources, they have money, they have offices, they have allowances, and they will continue to spread their poison and hate. And then, of course, anti-Semitism is developed intellectually by thinkers, by writers, by proselytizers. And I say to my American friends that the biggest distributor of anti-Semitic hate now, particularly to that part of the community influenced and wanting to listen to Islamist extremism, is the internet. And America has to look at its ideas of the First Amendment, and I'm a former president of the British National Union of Journalists. I am by nature a free speech man, a First Amendment man, but the internet is now being used to disseminate anti-Semitic hate. And people in America particularly, because in other countries there are laws that can stop this, can imprison people, can stop sites from promoting this stuff. But in America, the absolute adherence to First Amendment principles of freedom of communication and liberty of expression now, I think, needs serious looking at. But then finally, of course, anti-Semitism supported by intellectuals, supported by organized political parties, mainly of the extreme right, is also turned into state policy by Iran, as we heard this week, by the Saudi government through the export of Wahhabi extreme ideology, and in the mosques paid for and some of the madrasas paid for by the Saudis, they are churning out preachers of hate, literature of hate. It is shaming to see in British faith schools and some British mosques, not most, but in some, brochures and pamphlets paid for directly or indirectly by the Saudis, which contain descriptions of Jews which are as foul and anti-Semitic as anything you'd have seen in Nazi ideology. But are we actually saying clearly, en clair, to the Saudi government that this has to stop? Is the American government and its warm relationship with the Saudi government and the British and French governments, are not picking out in America at all, absolutely clear in saying, yes, we want a relationship with you, but you've got to stop the export of anti-Semitism. We're seeing in other countries around the world remarks by President Chavez, remarks by the Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir when he was in office.